CEO's paralyzed daughter sat alone at her birthday cake until a single dad said, "Can we join you?" A 19-year-old girl sits alone in a $1 million penthouse, staring at a birthday cake with one flickering candle. The rain streaks down floor-to-ceiling windows while she counts the minutes until this day is over. Her wheelchair is positioned perfectly in front of a cake that costs more than most people's monthly rent. Yet she's never felt more worthless in her entire life. What you're about to hear will shatter your heart and then rebuild it in ways you never expected. But first, I need you to do something for me. Drop your location and the time you're watching the comments right now, because what I'm about to share connects us all, no matter where we are in this world. Have you ever felt completely invisible to the people who should love you most? Have you ever sat in a room full of expensive things, yet felt like you owned nothing that mattered? Have you ever wondered if anyone would notice if you just disappeared? That's exactly how Lyra Draven felt on the night that changed everything. Here's a girl who used to dance, who used to light up every room she entered, who had dreams bigger than the empire her father built. But after one devastating accident, she became a ghost in her own home. Her billionaire father, Victor Draven, buried himself so deep in his work that he forgot he still had a daughter breathing the same air. This is what happens when wealth can't buy the one thing that matters, human connection. While her father conducted million-dollar deals from his home office, Lyra sat in complete silence, wondering if this was all her life would ever be. Birthdays marked not by celebration, but by the crushing weight of loneliness. Surrounded by luxury, drowning in isolation, the cake in front of her wasn't just dessert. It was a monument to everything she'd lost. Her independence, her father's attention, her belief that anyone could ever see past the wheelchair of the woman still fighting to exist inside. But what happened next will restore your faith in strangers. What happened next will prove that sometimes the universe sends exactly the right people at exactly the right moment. What happened next will show you that love doesn't knock. It simply asks, "Can we join you?" Listen, if you're someone who believes disabled people deserve love and attention, not isolation, you need to subscribe because too many people ignore stories like this. If you're not the kind of person who thinks wealth equals happiness, if you're not someone who believes physical limitations define a person's worth, then hitting that subscribe button is how you show you stand with people like Lyra. Because what you're about to discover will change how you see family, how you view strangers, and how you understand that sometimes the most broken people create the most beautiful connections. That elevator door was about to open, and everything Lyra thought she knew about loneliness, about love, about what her life could be, was about to be completely transformed. Are you ready for a story that will make you believe in magic again? 3 years ago, Lyra Draven wasn't sitting in a wheelchair. She was flying, not literally, but close enough. The accident happened during her junior year of high school at the one place she felt most alive, the dance studio. She'd been practicing for her college auditions, determined to prove that a tech billionaire's daughter could make it on pure talent, not daddy's money. The ceiling beam that crushed her spine wasn't supposed to fall. The contractor later blamed faulty installation, but by then, Lyra's dreams of Juilliard were buried under medical bills that even Victor's fortune couldn't undo the damage of. Here's what nobody tells you about losing everything in an instant. It's not just your body that breaks. Your entire identity shatters. The girl who used to sneak out to underground dance battles in Brooklyn warehouses suddenly couldn't even reach the top shelf in her own kitchen. But here's the twist that nobody saw coming. Victor didn't retreat into work because he was grieving his wife. He'd been emotionally absent long before cancer took Elena. The truth? He threw himself into building his empire precisely because he was terrified of actually connecting with the family he already had. Elena used to be the bridge between father and daughter. She translated Victor's awkward love into hugs, his business trips into bedtime stories about daddy conquering the world for them. When she died, that bridge collapsed, leaving Victor and Lyra stranded on opposite sides of a chasm neither knew how to cross. The penthouse itself tells this story in ways words can't. Lyra's room still holds her old dance trophies. Victor hired someone to polish them weekly, thinking this showed he cared. But the dance bar he installed after the accident, it's never been touched. Too painful to use, too expensive to remove. Victor's office is directly across from Lyra's bedroom, separated by exactly 47 steps. She's counted. He works 18-hour days from that office, taking calls with Tokyo at 3 a.m. and London at dawn. Lyra can hear his voice through the walls, animated and passionate about quarterly projections, yet he hasn't asked about her art in over 2 years. The kitchen is stocked with personal chef's ingredients, truffle oil, aged wines, exotic spices. But most nights, Lyra eats cereal from a box because cooking feels pointless when you're eating alone. The dining table seats 12 people for elaborate dinner parties that never happen anymore. Their penthouse spans the entire top floor of Manhattan high-rise, with 3 bedrooms they never use, a library filled with books nobody reads, and a grand piano that hasn't been played since Elena's funeral. It's a museum of a life they used to live, before tragedy taught them that money can't buy back what matters most. The birthday cake sitting in front of Lyra costs $300. Victor's assistant ordered it from the same bakery that makes desserts for celebrity weddings. But nobody bothered to ask what flavor Lyra actually wanted. Nobody remembered that she's been lactose intolerant since childhood. Nobody thought to light more than 1 candle, because nobody knew she used to make the same wish every year, that her family would eat dinner together just once. This is the brutal mathematics of wealth without warmth. You can afford everything except the thing you need most. While Victor calculated market trends, Lyra calculated how many days it had been since he looked her in the eyes. While he networked at charity galas for children's hospitals, his own daughter sat at home wondering if her existence mattered to anyone at all. The rain outside matched her mood, relentless, cold, and seemingly endless. She'd blown out that single candle 3 times already, each wish more desperate than the last. The 4th time, she didn't bother wishing at all. That's when she heard the elevator. Listen, if you're not the type of person who turns their back on struggling single parents and disabled children, then subscribing is how you show you care about these stories. Because what you're about to witness is proof that sometimes salvation comes from the most unlikely places, in the most unexpected packages. The doors opened, and Lyra's entire world shifted on its axis. Not because of what she saw, but because of what she heard next, a small voice asking his father a question that would change 3 lives forever. "Dad, why does she look so sad on her birthday?" The voice belonged to a boy who couldn't be older than 6, with chocolate-stained fingers and a backpack covered in superhero patches. His father, a man with weathered hands and kind eyes, gently placed a bakery box on a marble counter before answering. "Sometimes, buddy, people get lonely even when they have everything." Lyra's head snapped up. She'd been expecting Victor's assistant, maybe the building maintenance. Certainly not this duo who looked like they'd wandered in from a completely different world. The man wore a simple gray Henley and jeans that had seen better days. His son clutched a worn stuffed dragon and stared at Lyra with the unfiltered curiosity only children possess. "I'm Rowan Hale," the man said, extending his hand with genuine warmth. "This is my son, Cass. We have a delivery for Victor Draven, but..." He glanced around the empty penthouse, taking in the solitary birthday setup. "It seems we've interrupted something important." Here's where the story takes an unexpected turn. Rowan wasn't supposed to be there. The original delivery driver had called in sick, and Rowan's food truck was parked 3 blocks away when the bakery owner begged him to make this one run. He'd been planning to grab dinner ingredients for him and Cass, but instead found himself in an elevator ascending to luxury he'd only seen in movies. The bakery box contained a mistake, a custom cake order for a corporate event that got canceled last minute. Victor's assistant had simply redirected it to the penthouse rather than waste the money. Nobody expected anyone to actually eat it. "We were just leaving," Rowan continued, sensing he'd stumbled into something private. But Cass had other plans. The 6-year-old walked directly to Lyra's wheelchair, completely unbothered by what adults usually found awkward. "My dad makes the best grilled cheese in the whole city," he announced. "But you look like you need something better than cake." Lyra blinked. When was the last time someone under the age of 30 had spoken to her like she was normal? "What kind of something?" she asked, surprised at herself by engaging. Cass grinned, revealing a gap where his front tooth used to be. "Magic." Before anyone could protest, the boy pulled a deck of cards from his backpack. Not the pristine kind from expensive magic sets, but cards worn soft from constant use. His small hands shuffled them with the determination of someone who'd practiced his routine 1,000 times. "Pick a card, any card," he announced with theatrical flair. Lyra found herself smiling for the first time in weeks. She selected a card, the Queen of Hearts, and showed it to Cass before sliding it back into the deck. What happened next wasn't polished. Cass's shuffle was clumsy. His patter included forgetting half his lines, and he dropped the cards twice. But Wade triumphantly held up the wrong card, the 7 of clubs, and declared Tada with such pure joy something magical actually did occur. Lyra laughed, not the polite chuckle she perfected for her father's business associates, but a real laugh that bubbled up from somewhere she'd forgotten existed. The sound surprised all three of them. "That's not my card," she said, still giggling. Cass's face fell for exactly 2 seconds before his father whispered something in his ear. The boy's eyes lit up like Christmas morning. "Wait, I know what happened," Cass announced. "Your card escaped because it knew you needed a friend more than a magic trick." He held up the Queen of Hearts, which had somehow ended up in his front pocket. "See? She was trying to get closer to your heart." The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was electric. Rowan watched his son work the kind of magic that had nothing to do with card tricks and everything to do with seeing people for who they really were. "Cass," Rowan said softly, "maybe we should let the lady enjoy her birthday." "Actually," Lyra said, her voice stronger than it had been in months, "I was just sitting here thinking how much I hate eating cake alone." She looked up at Rowan, really looked at him, and saw something she hadn't seen in years of being around her father's wealthy associates. This man wasn't calculating what he could gain from her. He wasn't awkwardly avoiding eye contact because of the wheelchair. He was simply present, kind, and genuinely concerned about a stranger's well-being. "Can we join you?" Rowan asked, and those 4 words carried weight neither of them fully understood yet. Cass was already dragging a chair over to the table. "Dad, can we tell her about the dragon story?" "What dragon story?" Lyra asked, wheeling closer to the table for the first time in hours. The birthday cake suddenly looked less like a symbol of loneliness and more like the centerpiece for an unexpected party. The rain outside continued its steady rhythm, but inside the penthouse, something had shifted. The silence wasn't empty anymore. It was full of possibility. And upstairs in his office, Victor Draven was about to discover that some interruptions change everything. The dragon story turned out to be about Cass's mother. "Mama used to tell me that dragons aren't mean," Cass explained, carefully dividing his cake slice in half to share with Lyra. "They're just lonely and misunderstood. She said the fire comes from all the love they can't give to anyone." Rowan's hand stilled on his coffee cup. Lyra caught the micro-expression, a flash of pain so raw it made her chest tighten. "Your mama sounds very wise," Lyra said gently. "Where is she now?" "She's in the stars," Cass replied matter-of-factly. "Dad says that's where the brightest people go when their bodies get too tired to keep fighting." The weight of those words settled over the table. Lyra had been expecting a divorce story, maybe a custody arrangement. She wasn't prepared for this level of loss from someone so young. "Cass, why don't you show Lyra your art supplies?" Rowan suggested, his voice carefully controlled. As his son rummaged through his backpack, Rowan turned to Lyra with exhausted honesty. "Leukemia. She fought for 3 years." Cass was barely 4 when he stopped, running a hand through his hair. "I'm sorry. I don't usually dump this on strangers." "We're not strangers anymore," Lyra said simply. "And I understand more than you might think." Here's what she didn't expect to share: I used to think the accident was the worst thing that could happen to me. Losing my ability to dance felt like losing everything. But watching my father disappear emotionally, that's been worse than any physical limitation. Rowan leaned forward slightly. He wasn't always distant. He used to choreograph business meetings around my recitals. He learned ballet terminology just to understand what I was passionate about. Lyra's voice grew softer. After Mom died, then my accident, he retreated into work like it was a fortress. I think he believes loving people just leads to losing them. Cass had found his colored pencils and was quietly sketching at the far end of the table, giving the adult space to talk while staying close enough to feel included. I get that, Rowan said. After Maya died, I was terrified to let Cass get attached to anyone. What if I couldn't protect him from more loss? What if caring about new people meant betraying her memory? But you're here, Lyra observed, taking care of strangers on a rainy night. Rowan's smile was rueful. Maya used to say that grief doesn't honor love by shutting down. It honors love by staying open. Took me 2 years to understand what she meant. That's when the unexpected happened. Lyra wheeled over to the window, gesturing for Rowan to follow. The city sprawled below them, millions of lights representing millions of lives, each carrying their own invisible struggles. You want to know the real reason I hate birthdays now, she said. It's not the accident. It's that every year, I'm reminded of how much smaller my world has become. I used to dream about traveling, performing in different countries, connecting with people through art. Now my biggest adventure is convincing my father to let me take painting classes downtown. What's stopping you from just going? Lyra's laugh was bitter. You mean besides the obvious? She gestured to her wheelchair. Victor hired a security company after the accident. They're discreet, but they're always watching. He convinced himself it's about protecting me, but really, it's about controlling the only family he has left. Rowan processed this. So, you're essentially a prisoner in a golden cage, Lyra finished. Beautiful surroundings, unlimited resources, zero freedom to make my own choices about who I spend time with or where I go. The conversation was interrupted by Cass presenting his masterpiece, a drawing of 3 people sitting at a table with a birthday cake in the center. Above them, he'd drawn stars. That's us, he announced proudly. And that's Mama watching from the stars, happy that we found new friends. The innocent honesty of it broke something open in both adults. Here was a 6-year-old who understood connection better than most grown-ups. That's when they heard footsteps in the hallway. Victor appeared in the doorway, still wearing his business suit despite the late hour. His eyes took in the scene, the stranger at his table, his daughter's face more animated than he'd seen in months, the child's artwork scattered across expensive marble. Lyra, his voice carried the controlled tone he used in board meetings. I wasn't aware we were expecting company. The temperature in the room shifted immediately. Rowan stood up, extending his hand. Mr. Draven, Rowan Hale, we made a delivery, and your daughter was kind enough to share her birthday cake. Victor didn't shake the offered hand. Instead, his gaze moved between Rowan's worn clothes and the casual way Lyra was leaning forward in her chair, engaged in a way she hadn't been with any of Victor's carefully vetted social connections. I see. Victor's tone could have frosted windows. And what exactly do you deliver, Mr. Hale? The question carried implications that made Lyra's cheeks burn. She recognized her father's boardroom intimidation tactics, the way he sized up potential threats to his empire. Food, Rowan replied calmly. I run a food truck. Tonight, I was helping out a bakery with their overflow deliveries. Victor's expression suggested this explanation was somehow worse than if Rowan had been a con artist. A food truck. The disdain was unmistakable. Lyra felt something ignite in her chest, a fury she'd been suppressing for years. Dad, stop. Her voice cut through the tension. Rowan and Cass are the first people who've treated me like a human being in months. They're not here for your money or connections. They're here because they're kind. Lyra, you don't understand. I understand perfectly. She wheeled her chair to face him directly. You're terrified that I might actually connect with someone who sees me as more than Victor Draven's damaged daughter. The silence that followed was devastating. Victor's carefully constructed walls cracked just enough to reveal the fear underneath. Not just of losing control, but of being abandoned by the one person he had left. If you believe people shouldn't be judged by their bank account or physical limitations, subscribing means you stand against that kind of prejudice. Because what happens next will show you exactly what happens when love challenges power, when authenticity confronts control. The birthday cake sat between them, its single candle having burned down to nothing, but the real fire was just beginning. Victor's phone buzzed with another international call, forcing him to step away from the mounting tension. As his voice faded down the hallway, Cass had curled up on the living room sofa, exhausted from the evening's excitement. I need air, Lyra whispered to Rowan. There's a balcony through the kitchen. The rain had softened to a gentle mist, and the city lights blurred into watercolor streaks below them. Lyra positioned her wheelchair near the railing, while Rowan leaned against the doorframe, both of them processing what had just happened inside. He's not wrong to be protective, Rowan said quietly. I'd probably react the same way if someone walked into Cass's life without warning. No, you wouldn't. Lyra's voice was certain. You'd ask questions. You'd get to know them. You wouldn't assume the worst based on their clothes or their job. The silence stretched between them, filled with the distant hum of traffic and the soft patter of rain on glass. Can I tell you something? Lyra continued, turning to face him. Before tonight, I hadn't laughed in 4 months. I hadn't felt excited about anything in over a year. I was starting to believe that this was it, that my life peaked at 16 and everything after the accident was just existing. Rowan moved closer, close enough that she could see the flecks of gold in his brown eyes. And now I'm remembering what it feels like to be seen. Not as Victor Draven's daughter, not as the girl in the wheelchair, not as someone to be fixed or pitted or managed, just seen. Here's what nobody tells you about moments like this. They don't happen gradually. 1 second you're strangers sharing cake, and the next you're standing on the edge of something that could change everything. Rowan reached out, his fingers gently touching the rain droplets that had caught in Lyra's hair. You're remarkable, he said simply. Your father's scared because he knows you're going to outgrow this place, wheelchair or not. People like you don't stay contained forever. Lyra's heart hammered against her ribs. When was the last time someone had touched her like she was precious rather than fragile? When was the last time someone looked at her with desire instead of sympathy? Rowan, she whispered. Yeah, kiss me. He hesitated. Lyra, your father. My father doesn't have to decide who I kiss. Her voice was steady, determined. I'm 19 years old. I've spent 3 years having every choice made for me, every risk calculated and eliminated. I want this choice to be mine. The kiss, when it came, wasn't the gentle, careful thing people might expect for someone in Lyra's situation. It was hungry, desperate, filled with years of suppressed longing and the intoxicating rush of rebellion. Lyra's hands tangled in Rowan's shirt, pulling him closer, claiming this moment as completely hers. For 30 seconds, she wasn't the tragic billionaire's daughter or the disabled girl who needed protection. She was just a woman kissing a man who made her feel alive again. That's when the balcony door slammed open. Victor stood in the doorway, his face a mask of fury and disbelief. Behind him, Cass stirred on the couch, rubbing sleepy eyes. Step away from my daughter. Victor's voice was lethal quiet, the tone he reserved for corporate enemies. Now. Rowan immediately moved back, but Lyra's hand shot out to grab his wrist. Don't you dare apologize, she said, loud enough for her father to hear. Victor stepped onto the balcony, his presence filling the space with barely controlled rage. I want him gone. Security will escort you out. No. Lyra's voice cut through the night air like a blade. Security will do nothing because I'm not a child anymore. You're my daughter living in my home, living in your prison. The words exploded out of her, years of frustration finally finding their voice. You've turned me into your pet project, something to be managed and protected and controlled because you're too terrified to actually love me. Victor's face went white. How dare you? How dare I what? Feel something? Want something? Choose something for myself. Lyra's voice cracked with emotion. You spent 3 years making sure I have no life outside these walls because you can't handle losing anyone else. But you know what, Dad? You already lost me. The minute you decided loving me meant suffocating me. Here's the moment that changes everything. Victor's carefully constructed composure finally shattered. You think I don't love you? His voice broke, all the corporate polish stripped away. You think I work 18-hour days because I don't care? You think I hired security because I want to control you? Then why? Lyra demanded, tears streaming down her face. Because I already failed to protect you once. The confession tore out of him like a physical wound. The dance studio? I own that building. I cut corners on the renovation to save money. That beam that fell? It fell because your father prioritized profit over safety. The silence that followed was deafening. Even the city seemed to hold its breath. The accident was my fault, Victor continued, his voice barely a whisper. My negligence put you in that wheelchair. So yes, I hired security. Yes, I monitor who you see. Because I can't survive knowing I failed you again. Lyra stared at her father, seeing him clearly for the first time in years. Not the powerful CEO, not the distant patriarch, but a broken man carrying guilt so massive it had consumed his ability to connect with the one person he loved most. Dad, she said softly, the accident wasn't punishment for your business decisions. It was just an accident. Bad luck in physics and terrible timing. But if I hadn't cut those corners, if you hadn't cut those corners, maybe it would have been another beam on another day. Maybe it would have been someone else's daughter. She reached for his hand. You can't control every variable in the universe. And you can't love me by making my world smaller. Rowan, who had been standing quietly through this family earthquake, finally spoke. Mr. Draven, I have a son. I know what it's like to be terrified of losing the person who matters most. But I also know that love without freedom isn't love. It's fear wearing love's mask. Victor looked at this man, this food truck owner who somehow understood his daughter better in one evening than he had in 3 years. What happened next will either tear this family apart forever or heal wounds that seemed impossible to fix. Because sometimes the most powerful confrontations don't end with someone winning and someone losing. Sometimes they end with everyone finally telling the truth. The truth hung in the air between them, like a bridge none of them were sure they could cross. Victor's shoulders sagged as if the weight of 3 years of guilt had finally become visible. He stared at his hands, the same hands that had signed the cost-cutting contracts that had built an empire while failing to build safety for his own daughter. I need to sit down, he said quietly. But instead of heading inside, Victor lowered himself on the balcony floor, his expensive suit getting soaked by the rain-slicked concrete. For the first time in years, the powerful suit looked like what he really was, a father who had lost his way. Rowan made an unexpected move. He sat down too, right there on the wet balcony floor, his back against the railing. When Maya was dying, he said, I spent 6 months researching every experimental treatment, every clinical trial, every possible miracle cure. I convinced myself that if I could just control enough variables, work hard enough, spend enough money, I could save her. Victor looked up, recognizing something familiar in Rowan's voice. The night she died, she held my hand and said, stop trying to control death and start helping me live. I realized I'd spent so much time trying to prevent loss that I'd forgotten to be present for love. Lyra wheeled close to both men, forming a small circle on the rain-dampened balcony. Dad, I need you to hear something. I don't blame you for the accident, but I do blame you for disappearing afterward. You didn't lose just your wife. I lost my father too. Here's what nobody expected Victor to say next. I want to learn how to come back. The words were simple, but they carried the weight of genuine surrender. Not the strategic retreat of a businessman, but the raw admission of a man who had finally realized that control was an illusion. What would that look like? Lyra asked carefully. Victor was quiet for a long moment, watching the city lights blur through the rain. I don't know. I've forgotten how to be anyone except the CEO. I schedule my grief, compartmentalize my emotions, treat love like a business problem to be solved. From inside the penthouse, they could hear Castern on the couch, his small voice calling out, "Dad? Where are you? We should go inside," Rowan said. "It's getting late." But Victor surprised him again. Would you both stay for breakfast? I know it's presumptuous, but I haven't cooked a meal in my own kitchen since Elena died. I'd like to try." Lyra's eyes widened. Her father hadn't cooked anything in years. That was what staff was for. "You don't have to," Rowan started. "I want to," Victor interrupted. "I want to do something with my hands that isn't about profit margins or quarterly projections. I want to make breakfast for my daughter and—" He paused, looking at Rowan with something approaching respect. "And for the man who reminded her she deserves to be loved." The morning that followed was nothing like any of them expected. Victor's first attempt at pancakes was a disaster. Burned on the outside, raw in the middle. But instead of calling for the chef or ordering room service, he tried again and again. Lyra found herself laughing at her father's muttered curses when the batter stuck to the pan, while Cass offered helpful suggestions from his perch on the counter. "Dad, you're supposed to flip it when it bubbles," Cass announced solemnly, having inherited his father's love of cooking. "Thank you, Chef Cass," Victor replied with surprising warmth. "What else am I doing wrong?" As the sun rose over Manhattan, something extraordinary happened in that penthouse kitchen. Victor asked Lyra about her art, really asked with genuine curiosity about her process and inspiration. She showed him the sketches she'd been hiding in her room, drawings that captured not just images but emotions. "These are remarkable," he said, studying a charcoal drawing of hands reaching toward light. "Have you thought about showing them publicly? You mean like a gallery?" Lyra's voice carried years of suppressed hope. "I mean like whatever you want. Your art, your choice." Rowan watched this exchange while teaching Cass how to properly scramble eggs, marveling at how quickly walls could come down when people stopped defending them. But here's the truly unexpected part. Victor had a proposal. "Rowan, I want to invest in your food truck." "Mr. Draven, I appreciate the offer, but I can't accept your money." "Not charity," Victor clarified. "Partnership. I've been looking for ways to give back to the community, and I think you understand connection in ways I've forgotten. What if we could expand your operation? Not change what you do, but help you do more of it." Over the following weeks, something beautiful began to take shape. Rowan's single food truck became a fleet of 5, each one staffed by people who understood that food was about more than nutrition. It was about bringing people together. Victor used his business connections not to control, but to create opportunities, helping Rowan secure permits for serving in underserved neighborhoods. Lyra's art studio was set up in the penthouses and used library, but more importantly, Victor helped her arrange her first solo exhibition at a gallery in Soho. The opening night featured not fancy canapes, but grilled cheese sandwiches from Rowan's truck, served in a crowd that included both art collectors and the homeless individuals whose portraits Lyra had been secretly sketching. The most beautiful transformation was the quietest one. Victor started leaving his office at 6 p.m. He learned to ask Lyra about her day without trying to solve her problems. He taught Cass card tricks during weekend visits, creating the kind of intergenerational bond that money can't buy, but presence can nurture. The birthday that had started with a single candle and crushing loneliness became the anniversary of the night everything changed. Each year after, they celebrated not just Lyra's birthday, but what they privately called Connection Day, the The reminder that love shows up in unexpected packages when we're brave enough to let strangers become family. If you believe in second chances and that families can heal from trauma, your subscription tells me you support these kind of transformative stories. Because what happened to Victor, Lyra, and Rowan proves that it's never too late to choose connection over control, vulnerability over protection, love over fear. The rain that night hadn't just washed the city clean. It washed away years of accumulated pain, making room for something none of them had dared to hope for, a family that chose each other every single day. 5 years later, Cass draws a new card from his deck. He's 11 now, and his magic tricks have gotten significantly better. But the most powerful magic happened that rainy night, when a simple question changed 3 lives forever. Can we join you? For words that prove the most profound transformations don't require grand gestures or expensive solutions. They require the courage to see someone else's pain and choose connection over convenience. Here's what Victor, Lyra, and Rowan discovered, and what their story teaches all of us. Your bank account is not your worth account. Victor had billions, but was emotionally bankrupt until he learned that true wealth is measured in moments of genuine connection, not market valuations. The richest people aren't those who can afford anything. They're those who can afford to be vulnerable with the people they love. Lyra's wheelchair never defined her capacity for passion, ambition, or love. Disability doesn't diminish your right to experience the full spectrum of human emotion and connection. The world might see limitations, but the right people see possibilities. Never let anyone, including yourself, convince you that physical challenges equal emotional restrictions. Sometimes the family you need isn't the one you're born into, but the one that chooses you. Rowan and Cass didn't walk into that penthouse looking for a new family. They were simply being kind to a stranger. But kindness has this incredible ability to grow into something bigger than anyone expects. The most meaningful relationships often begin with someone brave enough to ask, "Are you okay?" Vulnerability isn't weakness dressed up as courage. It's the only doorway to real healing. When Victor finally admitted his guilt about the accident, when Lyra confessed her loneliness, when Rowan shared his grief about Maya, those moments of raw honesty became the foundation for genuine connection. Hiding your wounds doesn't heal them. Sharing them with safe people does. Parents who love through control end up controlling their children away from love. Victor's security detail and hovering protection felt like love to him, but felt like prison to Lyra. Real parental love teaches children how to navigate the world, not how to hide from it. The goal isn't to eliminate all risk. It's to raise humans capable of handling risk with wisdom and support. But here's the lesson that might surprise you most. Every day, you pass by someone sitting alone at their birthday cake. Maybe it's not literal. Maybe it's the coworker eating lunch alone, the neighbor whose porch light stays on too late, the person at the grocery store who looks like they're carrying invisible weight. You have the power to be someone's Rowan. You have the ability to see past surface circumstances and ask, "Can I join you?" You might think you're just being polite, but you could be changing someone's entire life trajectory. The rain that night washed away more than city dust. It washed away the lie that we're meant to carry our pain alone. Victor learned that protecting someone doesn't mean isolating them. Lyra learned that her limitations don't limit her right to love. Rowan learned that opening his heart to new people doesn't dishonor Maya's memory. It honors her legacy of connection. If this story moved you and you believe everyone deserves to find their person regardless of circumstances, subscribing is how you join a community that celebrates these truths. Because every time you choose connection over convenience, vulnerability over protection, inclusion over judgment, you're proving that love wins. Comment your location and the time you're watching. Because stories like this connect us all across the world, and I want to know where love is winning tonight. From penthouse balconies to food truck corners, from quiet moments of desperation to breakthrough moments of hope, we're all part of the same human story. The question isn't whether you'll face your own rainy birthday night. The question is, will you be ready to ask someone else to join you?